ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming. My name's Donald MacLeod and I present a programme called Composer of the Week on BBC Radio 3. And this gentleman, I think you probably know already.
I'm the Composer of the Week.
I have to declare an interest, really. I am an enormous admirer of Sir Thomas Allen, as I'm sure you all are. And actually slightly awesome. He is genuinely one of my musical heroes, as I'm sure is the case for you. I mean, he's a man who's an outstanding singer, actor, director, painter, bird watcher, golfer, and Radio 4 listener. But then nobody's perfect. A few years ago, he listed as his ambitions to get into the British Amateur Golf Championship and to get a picture admitted to the Royal Academy's summer exhibition. Either of those objectives achieved?
I think I've got more chance of getting a picture hung at the St Andrews Golf Club than or even more so my own, perhaps. No, nothing. Oh. Nowhere near. Nowhere near. I'm not Eunice Stubbs. She's been in the academy on a few occasions, but mind you, I've never tried. So unless you try, you're never going to know, are you? So I've now got a little studio at home. I've just sort of had made. It's quite extraordinary. It's plumbed for water, so all I need is a kettle, and my wife will never see me again. I mean, it's lovely. So I've got somewhere where I can really enjoy it now, and I've got a bit more time on my hands these days than used to be the case for about 45 years.
We'll come back to painting later. But I read you were interviewed on the occasion of the 45th anniversary of your first singing at Covent Garden, that you crept into opera quietly without anyone really noticing.
Yes, if you can do that. Although you do have to start being noisy in opera, otherwise you don't survive. And that really is the difference in many ways, whether you can make enough noise on a stage to be heard. And if not, then you seek another way. But I went from just a little way further north, the proper north, from here to there, to the Royal College of Music, with the full intention of being England's Fischer-Dieskau, believing at the time that Fischer-Dieskau spent his entire life just going from one recital room to another, or one German church or another, singing either Bach or Handel or Schubert, whatever it might be. And that's what I wanted my life to be. And then the economic truth came through that you couldn't any longer have that kind of life. And indeed, perhaps nor should you want to. But late in the day, I put my foot in the operatic water and quite liked it. And someone said, you really ought to think about this. And when I looked at the bank balance, I believed that he was right. So I did some auditions and went on from there. Yes.
You just made a little jerky allusion to it. How important is it to you that you're a man of the North?
There were years I left on a train. I can still see that little puffer train coming in. Well, it probably was a diesel, but into Seaham Station, and me putting on a heavy case and going down to London in fear and trembling and very upset and sad to live in digs in Stockwell, which were not lovely, nor was Kilburn, if I remember rightly, but that's another story. A friend of mine out there will tell you and confirm. It was hard, and then I sort of became more accustomed to being in the south. And then the journey began, slowly but surely, and then it took me away. That same little puffer train, now in France and going through Germany and other places, took me further and further away. But the north was always there, especially Durham. And 6 years ago, as I said in an address in Durham Cathedral, the train just came back and I just stepped off at Durham Station and became Chancellor. It was a long journey. But it got there eventually, and the north is hugely important to me. What do I mean by that? It's just my roots, and I'm glad I'm from there rather than Leicester. No, I don't mean that. But I usually say Leicester, and I don't know why. It's got a king in a car park, which is good, and it's got a football team that did well. There, the similarities with my own area end. No, but it is important. There's something very grounded. It comes out of my family and from the community that I was accustomed to there, and that was very important.
I read a little while ago, John Tomlinson was interviewed, and he said the greatest compliment for a singer is when someone says to them, you have a voice that sounds as if you've never had a singing lesson in your life. And
Discuss.
well, I mean, I think we kind of know what he means,
Yes.
but I was fascinated to, I'm sure you've probably all read the memoir which Tom wrote a ridiculous number of years ago, in 1993,
Something like that, yeah.
called Foreign Parts. It was a journal of a singer's year. And it certainly gave the light at the notion that singers lead glamorous lives and, you know, it's all one chauffeur-driven limo from one venue to another. But in the book, you say that after leaving music college, you never had a formal singing lesson.
No, I didn't. The teaching of singing, I think, has changed a lot in the interim. I can remember the method of one particular teacher at the college at the time. And I think it was probably a system that was used in Italy and other places, but it seems absolutely bizarre when I think of it now, which was the use of a little plastic pillar, I suppose, a peg, that you gripped between the upper and lower teeth. And you kept it there and said, and then you took it out. I don't know what it was supposed to do, but it could only create tension as far as I could see. But this particular teacher, I think, swore by it as a method when all other means had failed. And I had a teacher, I think, Harvey Allen, who did me no harm. I learned a lot about breath control and breathing exercises and tucking the tummy in for the F sharp and things of that sort. But it was fairly rudimentary compared to what I see being taught now and what I hear of being taught now. And anyhow, after 25 years or so, forging away myself, I just went in for a checkup after about 25 years, found somebody who listened and said, oh, well, that's to do with breathing, and it's always to do with breathing, of taking a breath. It sounds the simplest thing in the world to say, but it is true. If you breathe in well and send it back out with some notes on, that's all it's about.
It's a fundamental thing, though, for all musicians. I remember talking to Peter Donahoe quite a few years ago when he just started conducting, and he realized that he couldn't get the orchestra to begin together. It seemed a fundamental thing, but it just didn't work time after time, and he didn't know what he was doing. And eventually a member of one of the orchestras came up to him and said, Peter, you have to remember to breathe.
Yes.
And that seems such a fundamental thing, but it's actually for instrumentalists as well.
Absolutely.
Breath is
the beginning of a phrase, whatever it might be. That breath in is so important. If I'm going to I've never put a bow on strings. One day I might. Maybe I can make a cello in my workshop. But I mean, you can't just do that. That's dead air, isn't it? If you just put it there. If I prepare that, though, whatever it is I'm doing, then I know it's ready. It gives a preparation for it, and it gives a time when that should happen, and it's the breath in that does that.
You spoke a certain amount about breathing yesterday. I'm sure some of you came to the masterclass which Tom gave yesterday, which was absolutely mesmerizing. And there were, one of the revealing things, just incidentally, was the fantastic range of cultural references that Tom threw at the singers. So there were the obvious things, Peter Pears and Birgit Nielsen, less obviously Catherine Hepburn and the House of Windsor, less obviously still Eddie Stobart,
Yes.
bowling greens and battlefields, accordions and cellos, and Angostura bitters.
Good heavens, yes. That's
It was very impressive, but you threw out at one point, sort of virtually, the line that, about singing, there's no great trick to it, it's just about being genuine.
yes, I think so. You know, when you go down to Leeds Minster now and pick up a hymn book and you take the breath and you open your mouth and sing that first thing, there's a belief, usually in that instance. And my preparation for any song, although there is preparation now, whereas when I first stepped on a platform at school and sang, "Old Simon the Cellarer keeps a restore of Malmsey and Malvoisie," I didn't know who Simon the Cellarer was. I didn't know what Malmsey was. And I couldn't actually tweet it online or whatever that is. I couldn't find out online what that was. And we didn't have an Oxford University dictionary in the house. So I was putting over this particular message of this song in blissful ignorance, largely. But it sounded all right. I mean, I was just out of short trousers singing this song about dating old Marjorie and drinking Malmsey and what have you. But the business of singing a song now, it's a balancing act. I realize now it's to do with singing, but the quality of the vocal line, the quality of the sung note is highly important, hugely important, of primary importance. But it's to do with the color of the word to which it's attached as well. So the text has become more and more important to me, and it's lovely revisiting songs now after a long time and with a different consideration. Actually, it's not dissimilar to coming back to Leeds. I came to Leeds first in, I think, 1971 or 2 with Welsh National Opera on tour. And, went to the Grand Theatre, walked through the doors, saw the stuff around me. That was it. I came a year or two ago, and I came this weekend, and there's been time to wander around with Janie and look at things. What a magnificent city it is. There's some extraordinary things, but you don't see them unless you've made that little puffer train journey for 40 years. You see it through different eyes. And similarly, the text that I use now, I can use differently. I can afford to gamble. I often say that maybe there are barnacles on the voice now, like an old ship. But the barnacles just add to the spectrum that's available to you as to what you want to do.
What are the kind of risks that you might take now that you wouldn't have in the past?
Well, I say that, but when I listen to the things that I did as a young man, not that I often do, but occasionally I hear them, and I thought, my God, that was daring, and there's a real attack. Whereas now it's more to do with, when I was a young man courting the girls, I played music. You balance the whole thing up between the spoken quality and the sung quality, knowing when the requirement really is predominantly of delivering a long bel canto, cantilena, whatever it might be, and when you really want to get the message over just in a kind of Sprechgesang almost. So I take chances in that sort of way. Joe and I we went on a national tour 2 years ago with that great musical, Winterreise. And it was terrific because I nearly backed out. Did you know that, Joe? I nearly backed out early on. Early on in the year, I was looking through this thinking, oh my goodness, this always was a lot of material, and it seems a lot more now. But I did something that I hadn't done in quite that degree before, and I just sat day after day after day after breakfast in a little sofa we've got in the kitchen, and I just had the book on my lap and I just read it day after day after day. I'd get so far one, put it aside, and I did that for weeks and weeks and weeks. I also practiced my voice, but it was an absorption that took me to places I'd not been to before. And I just
find the idea of performing, and presumably you didn't do this, night after night in a huge row, but it's such an incredibly powerful, emotionally draining piece for the audience to go through. I can't quite imagine what it must be like to have that happen to you physically.
Well, it's the equivalent of doing Lear, I suppose, or one of those great theatre roles. You set out on a journey, and do you know what the end of that journey is, or are you actually experiencing it with each footstep that you take along the way, and observe everything as you go? I like the idea of observing it as I go. Suddenly you're aware of dogs growling and barking, and chains, and dim lights in dark, snow-covered streets, and then it becomes something really interesting. And there's an example. One of the striking images that I had for that, and that helped me in the imagination of it all, as though there wasn't enough already. I went to the Slava Snow Show.
An amazing thing.
Which is an amazing experience.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Do you know Slava? The Russian engineer whose passion was being a clown. And he has a company that tours, and this famous show that's all clowns.
It's all, I should say, it's a fantastic thing because they tour internationally. It's completely wordless. There's no language barrier at all. So it's a lot of physical comedy, and there's mime and so on, and they make sounds, but they don't. There's a sort of wonderful inclusiveness, and it's an experience which turns everyone in the audience into a child.
Yes, absolutely. Which is what singers are, incidentally. And I urge that in all singers that I work with. I say, just hold on to childhood as long as you can, because it's the limitless areas of imagination that a child has that we lose as we get older and become more fussy about what we do and what we're seen to be doing. And if you can get rid of all of that and be an eccentric, or be whatever it might appear to be that you are to a public in general, then you're getting somewhere. Then you're exploring as an artist, and then the field is open to you. And the Slava show was wonderful because he came towards us on the stage and turned up stage, and suddenly these felt walls moved apart, and we had this snowstorm that came straight at him with a huge wind machine, and then out onto us in the audience. We were covered in cobwebs and all sorts of things at different times. It's the most amazing experience. And it's, everybody should take that on board and say, well, yes, that applies to my life when I go shopping at Waitrose, or when I next sing Schöne Müllerin, that I understand that now. And it was a clown that did that.
It's amazing. The Slava Snow Show managed to turn the Royal Festival Hall into a sympathetic venue.
It was amazing. It did. It did. And at the interval, you find yourself covered with this thing, and then they take it all away again. And then at a later stage in the show, your balls come from everywhere, and you're knocking them around. So 65-year-old orthopedic surgeons are there in the audience, and lawyers and people throwing balls around the place to 6-year-old children down there. It's wonderful. It just breaks all the barriers down. It's fantastic.
You commented to one singer, I'm thinking of the Winterreise, to one of the young singers yesterday, that in your painterly way, there are a number of songs, maybe every one, where you have a very specific visual image in mind. And in the case of Der Leiermann, the last of the cycle, it was a picture you saw in Russia. Are there other, it would just be lovely to hear if there are 2 or 3 other songs that you have very specific visual associations with.
I've got several. I own a few pictures, and there are British landscapes that stick in the mind. I'm mad about Stanley Spencer, and I keep on trying to fit him into whatever my work might be. But then I look at Houseman and Shropshire Lad, and I remember looking at paintings of that area, and and fields around Clun and what have you, and the blue air in the sky, and the blue remembered hills. I do understand that. And I remember driving towards a place called Clearbury Mortimer, in that neck of the woods, and you go through Clearbury Mortimer towards Ludlow and Bishop's Castle and what have you, and all along there you just see these strange mountainous peaks of the Malverns that come out of nowhere like some great dinosaur back. And the stuff that's around there is hazy, as you would expect, but it's a bluish haze, and it's affected by its light interference or whatever, and it's just very beautiful. It's that kind of imagery that sticks in my mind. But there are sea pictures as well that are useful, you know, many wonderful seascapes that there are. I have a drawing of a wonderful man of war done by F.W. Cook, and I can sit and look at it all day long. It's full of the most intricate detail. I love detail. I think, because my great-grandfather was a serious model maker for museums and things. He made wonderful museum pieces, and they were extraordinary. The more I think about them now, and it runs in the Allen family. I think this need to deal with detail.
How did you get into painting yourself, first of all?
I was ill when I was a child, and I had some paints. And I copied a picture of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It must have been in poster colors, I think. I certainly don't think we aspired to oils. Anyhow, the doctor came, and I was doing copies of cartoons, and one thing, and Dr. O'Sullivan came to see me, and these things were lying around, and he looked at them and he said, "Who did these, Mrs. Allen?" And she said, "Oh, Tom did." He said, "Oh, very good. He could be an artist. Mind you, there's not much money in it." So I drew from being young and enjoyed it and filled many books. And I sort of had an off period during college days. I think I didn't do much drawing then, but I then had some time during one summer and went to the Slade and did a life class. And I go to a life class occasionally now, and just to get the eye in and line it up. It's drawing I do more than anything, but I do paint. I love drawing. It makes you look at things, you know, and you see things differently. And I was in Scotland recently and doing Ariadne, and a very nice Dutch colleague singing the role of Bacchus. I went in one day in what was clearly a pink shirt, but I said to him, "No, it's blue." And he couldn't see that it was blue. I mean, I know it was pink, but it was blue. You know what I mean? It's that pink that has blue in it, as opposed to green or orangey pink or whatever it might be. This was blue pink, and he couldn't see that.
Well,
what do the Dutch know about painting?
I heard some statistic on Radio 4 only a few days ago that some actually quite staggering percentage of men are colourblind. So,
yeah.
You mentioned Stanley Spencer as somebody who's kind of shaped your view of what sort of style you might have. I mean, is there another painter that you would compare your style to?
Well, it's all north-driven, really. I don't paint matchstick men, but I understand Lowry. And I wish I'd bumped into him in Roker when he was around Sunderland at that time. It would have been quite an experience. And then we have another fella like Lowry up in the northeast called Norman Cornish, who is a kind of mixture of, I don't know what you would say, a mixture of Andy Capp and Lowry as well. So you get these wonderful northeastern Durham figures wandering around the streets of Spennymoor and the streets and streets of houses and chimneys and what have you. All that appeals to me. Now, there's a series of photographs I took some time ago, and I started doing ink drawings from them, and it was just the deconsecration of Dordon Colliery, which was one of the biggest mines in Europe at the time, and it was in my hometown. There were 3 in my hometown, and Dordon was the biggest. And I went there and did a lot of drawings of the piles of metal that were just one on top of the other, and what had been this massive area of serious, heavy industry. It was just a pile of rubble now. It was a black landscape. It was like some other planet. And then these jagged edges of metal, of greys and rusts and all sorts of things, one on top of the other. And it was a terrific image. And I keep on painting that and drawing it and trying to get it right.
What medium do you paint in mostly? Oil or acrylic? Or
Acrylic.
watercolor?
Acrylic because there was a painter friend of mine, Bert Irvin, said, I know you don't paint in oils because you're traveling all the time. He said, well, I'd make you a cradle and you could carry your oils and your oil paintings. I said, Bert, I've got enough to carry without an oil painting cradle. So I never bothered with that. But the acrylics are difficult because they do tend to dry on you and you finish up with a cake, dried cake in your hand. It's either that or gouache. I like gouache as well because it's solid.
I love it. I keep forgetting what it actually means. I just think it's such a fantastic word.
Gouache.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I gouache the paper. Gouache. Gouache there, a bit of gouache there. Yeah, it's lovely. And it's water-based, but it's solid. It has that body color in it, so it gives you... And watercolor is just too difficult. I can't decide how to use watercolor. I loved doing the structure of architecture, the drawing, the landscape, whatever it might be, and then a wash, the English wash system. I had a lovely friend called Leonard Evetts, who was a stained glass window maker. And I met him first at Durham when Peter Ustinov became Chancellor. And he introduced himself to me and I to him. And he said, I always regard these days as being part of the herbaceous border. So we had our gowns on and we were just lined up there like a lot of gladioli, whilst Peter Ustinov marched past. He was a magnificent watercolorist, and he used to love going to somewhere in Scotland. The name always escapes me, I can't remember. And to Norway, and he would go to Sognefjord and then just give the outline. So you'd have this wonderful silhouette or outline of mountains and wonderful Norwegian crags coming down into a great fjord. He would draw that very nicely, either with a very fine pen or pencil, and then you just get these wonderful, gentle colors to finish it off. And it's simple, but I like it. But it's not what I do necessarily, but I admire it.
I tried teaching myself watercolor painting many summers ago, and all my summers were spent in the northwest Highlands of Scotland, the very far northwest, where it's mostly sky. It's almost completely sky. And the trouble is that the light changes so fast that I find it impossible to capture anything.
But it's amazing because all those Scottish colorists that painted those beaches and and seascapes up there, it looks bizarre. It looks sort of psychedelic.
Yeah.
But that's what it is
But
like.
those colours are there. Yeah. Do you have accepting the Leeds City Art Gallery, which I think is a fantastic institution, but they don't make enough of Atkinson Grimshaw. Do you have
I think they're better there than I've seen them anywhere else. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the ones they have are lovely.
Yeah,
really lovely.
but it used to be that the first time you saw one, it was kind of behind a door in a weird place.
Yes, yeah.
They should be more prominent. Do you have a favourite gallery in the world?
There's I don't know. I've never thought about that really. Where? Oh,
My own prejudice is, I have to say, my own prejudice is the Frick in New York.
I do like
because
the Frick.
Every picture in there is a star.
Well, that's very
duffers at
true.
all.
That's very true. And you are wandering around. You feel as if the family have just left the room whilst you were wandering around there. That's true. And there are some stunning pictures there. Actually, Dallas ain't half bad.
Right.
Surprisingly, because you can go to Dallas and get a free tram, which is great. One of 3, I think, that were taken on second hand from Lisbon. Or I like railways. Or you can have a look at the various museums that they've got now. Or you can go and look at the book repository, of course, and see how Lee Harvey Oswald managed to shoot John F. Kennedy with an old gun. I don't think so. And then you can go to the various galleries that they've made. They're fantastic. There's a museum there of pre-Columbian art, which I didn't know anything about, but it is stunning. And there are some great pictures. And then if you go to Fort Worth, which ain't far away, you've got some great American. The Remingtons are all there, and so many others as well. There's Chardin, all kinds of people. I liked being there. It was good. It made it sort of a survivable experience that would not have been otherwise.
I was surprised in the book to read that you're a fairly passionate bird watcher. This is a man who went to Shetland to see the snowy owls.
Well, I went to sing Telemann, really. But the thing that got me there was the idea of seeing snowy owls, yes. Yeah, I've always done that. When we were schoolboys, we went into the woods in Seaton, up in the top end of Seaham, and I engineered and led two others into how to bend branches and stick them in the ground, bend them and tie them up at the top and put fronds and various on. And we would sit in there and watch for birds and hope to photograph them. Of course, we hadn't a hope in hell. I had a little Ilford Sportsman camera with a fixed tiny lens. It's sitting in the middle of a wood trying to photograph a wren. Can you imagine? No chance. But the construction was nice. And then after that, we went on school trips to the Farns, and that was very instructive. And it started with the Farne Islands, really, which are wonderful, remain wonderful, and we love going there.
Best bird-watching experience?
Yeah, Botswana. Botswana, the first time I was in Botswana, the first day we saw 135 species.
My goodness.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not counting quelea. You know, you see a flock of 5 million quelea go by.
I have no idea what that is.
Quelea is just you don't need to. I mean, they're just a tiny, irritating little bird. It's a sort of a locust bird, really, and they can decimate everywhere if they choose to. But they're like a little lovebird, and they fly around in flocks of millions and millions. But we have seen so many wonderful sights there. Even a roller, you know, which everyone says, oh, another bloody roller. They say that in Palm Springs as well, but they're talking about other things there. They're talking about but the roller, and it's just...
This is a fantastically, brilliantly coloured bird.
It is. It's just silly. It's just silly. It's got mauve, and it's got blues and whites and blacks and specks, but actually just a couple of 100 yards away from here, there's a whole family of missel thrushes, which I haven't seen for years, all in the almond trees there. It's fantastic. It's wonderful, just beside the minster. And they're all, you know, making that horrible noise they make. But lovely to watch them feeding the family this morning.
I guess we ought to touch on golf.
No, we really don't have.
No, I think we ought to. Who knew that the Royal Opera has had a golf society? Of which I guess you're a member. I mean,
well, I don't think it runs any longer, but it did for a while. You know, these things are usually down to one enthusiast who will carry the responsibility of trying to write to a golf club and say, "Can six fellas in stage technicians' uniforms come and play golf at your place, please?" It was a little bit like that. But Matthew, who was here last night, I think he's gone now. He's on his way to China. He's a terrific golfer. He loves his golf, and you know, I've played golf because my father and I and mother were in Scotland on holiday once, and I saw somebody hit a golf ball, and it was the aesthetics of it, really. I just watched this. It was colours. It was a white ball, a Dunlop 65, no doubt, going on a little plastic orange tee peg. It was all colours, this ball, and then this man took out a shiny shafted driver and hit this thing with a brown head on it. It went through the air into the blue sky, and the fir trees either side, a different green. And I thought, that's absolutely magical, and I want to do that. So we got to Ayr on this holiday of ours, and there was a little field where you could hit golf balls, so we did. And I kept on hitting golf balls for a long time afterwards.
Is your handicap something you're prepared to disclose?
No. It used to be good. But that was another fella. Like a lot of my life, I got down to 3 when I was about 17, I think, and it's been creeping up to about 46 since then.
one of the things that you've diversified into in latter years is directing. I want to talk about that, but there is a case of a very conspicuous singer who has not stopped singing but has started conducting. And maybe this is malicious of me, but I can't help but think that a part of that might be a kind of revenge.
I could say a lot of things about conductors now. One of the things I say about conductors is that I can walk down the street anywhere and not recognize them. I like to pride myself on thinking that that I give the impression of not looking at the conductor. I mean, these days we have monitors and what have you. But I always remember years ago, Jimmy Lockhart, who was my boss at Welsh National Opera for a while, and I learned so much from him. But he called me, and we were doing Bohème on tour. We might have come here with it. I'm not sure that we did. I don't think we did. It was in Bristol, and he called me in at the interval and told me he wanted to speak to me. He said, I don't know what's wrong tonight. I said, there's nothing wrong. What do you mean? You're not with me. And I said, well, where? I don't know what that means either. Where am I not with you? I'm not aware of it particularly, but these are early days. I'm learning my business. And he said, no, I don't feel I have contact with you. And I said, was there any particular place I was out with you? No, it's just a feeling that I don't have contact with you. And then I got to the bottom of it, and of course what he meant was that I wasn't spending my time doing that.
Sure.
And I thought, well, surely that's what I should be doing, ignoring, creating that impression. But no, he wanted my eyes riveted on him at some point at least, and they weren't. And he said, look, I'm going to be very naughty here. He said, the next time you go to Covent Garden, I didn't go to Covent Garden then, chance would be a fine thing. Next time you're in London, go and see this particular Welsh-based baritone. He's a past master of looking and yet not looking. So I thought, I'll go and see this great genius do this. So I went to this performance of Figaro or Falstaff, whatever it was, and what did I see? I saw somebody and I thought, no, that's not the way. I'm sure I can find a better way of doing things than that. And yes, well, there are other things. I mean, conductors are extraordinary creatures, and there's such respect for them. Mm. There's this. They walk into I've actually been in a room. Mind you, I was inclined to do the same thing myself, because it was in Italy many years ago in Florence, and we were there to rehearse Falstaff. The whole cast was assembled, and we were awaiting the arrival of the Maestro, and the Maestro duly arrived. And the doors opened, and the Maestro walked in, and the Maestro was Carlo Maria Giulini. And so we all stood, because you did that for Giulini. Sure. And I don't know, he was godlike. The way he dressed, the way his whole manner. I mean, you might have said it was a wee bit mamby-pamby, and I don't think he ever ate anything more solid than a slice of apple. But he was terrific, and I learned a lot from him in the few occasions that we worked together. And I did watch him, but I didn't need to watch him. It was all very, very clear. And but there is this almost reverence towards them, and I don't understand
this whole business of addressing them as Maestro.
Well, we get addressed as Maestro too, of course, abroad. Oh, so right. I'm Maestro too.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, I find it difficult. It's a difficult title to carry, but I'll do my best. And it is the way it is. But I remember that is the tradition of the theatre, in whichever theatre it is. And I remember Colin Davis remonstrating with David Ward one day, and he said, he addressed him as Maestro, and he said, "Oh no, not Maestro, please, can't handle that." But that's the way we address one another. It is that way, and it's customary. There's no don't shirk it off, because there is a kind of strange order of things, and that's that. But Yeah, it's nice to not to have to acknowledge them in the street because you didn't recognise them because you don't look at them. But I wouldn't say that of Bernard Haitink.
No.
I would carry his coattails down the street if he required that. Bernard is extraordinary. When you were talking earlier about the breath that Peter Donoghue didn't take. I mean, I've worked a lot with Haitink since 1973, and whenever he walks into the pit or onto a rostrum, wherever it might be, I'm aware of him bringing whatever it is he carries inside that head of his. And at the start of Meistersinger or Magic Flute or Daphnis and Chloe, whatever I saw him conduct most recently, there's just that moment, and he knows he's got 5 hours of Meistersinger ahead of him to start from scratch and build to something that is phenomenal after that length of time. And he has that way of just concentrating. It's like the Dalai Lama or something. And then it begins. And he makes all that work. And I'm more aware of that with him than anyone since Sawallisch. Sawallisch as well was that way. Strauss opera was all there before him, and he laid it out, and he took you through it and guided you through it. It was extraordinary, wonderful musical experience.
There are conductors, I was made aware of this no names, no pack drill recently, when, I really shouldn't be too specific,
Go on.
a singer we both know was taking on a very large role in a Strauss opera for the first time, and absolutely fantastic things were happening in the pit. And I was getting tremendous praise from the orchestra for the experience that they were having. And then I interviewed this singer, and we actually came to the end of what we were going to use in the program, in the presentation. And I said, it must be fantastic working with X. And he said, it's a complete nightmare because he never looks at us. He's so focused on the orchestra that actually we're just being kind of left to do it ourselves. And I guess that must happen.
That's not unique.
No.
Yeah, no, that does happen. And if anything were to go wrong, I mean, it's very few, and a singer occasionally does get out. You're carrying, these days, nobody likes the bump that is, or was, the prompt box. That's been largely eliminated. There was a great discussion at the Met when I was there just now. We were doing Merry Widow, and one of the cast, I think Susan, the widow herself, said, "Look, I just feel more secure with that thing there. I'm doing a lot during the course of the evening, a huge amount of dialogue, and if there's just someone there, it's an enormous security." And it is, because I remember, for example, with Meistersinger at Covent Garden, the last time I was involved in it, Hans Sachs had to cancel on 3 occasions, and Covent Garden, in its wisdom, had elected not to have a prompter for Meistersinger. That's a lot for the head to deal with, when you've got 3 enormous acts. The second act is 2 hours or something. And to hold all of that in your head, the role that you're playing, the text, the music, the timing, getting that right with whoever it is down there doing that, that's a huge responsibility. And if you can just take care of 1 or 2 little items with someone there, it's
an odd business. I mean, the way it works is not like a prompt in the theatre,
no,
where they're following and they will help you out if you get stuck.
Something happens.
The way it happens in the opera.
If it's done correctly, and one sees it less and less, and one sees it done correctly less and less, it's just the beginning of a word, or the word itself that begins a phrase, and then the cue. It leads to all kinds of problems. There was the cue given one night when the prompter got the finger in between the arm of the spectacles and the spectacles themselves. So there's all of that. But what were we talking about? Prompters.
Prompters.
Along those lines. But it was a great, great skill. And the prompter that did it on a regular basis, and they were just prompters, took great pride in that. And of course, it's a dying breed now.
You brought up Meistersinger, and I have to say one of I've been privileged to have a great many kind of superlative experiences, both in the concert hall and the opera house. And one of the finest was the Meistersinger at Covent Garden, in which you sang, I guess the most recent time, you sang Beckmesser.
Yes.
And he's, I guess, the most problematic role in the opera, really, for a number of reasons, not least because there's a certain amount of lore and so on that's accreted to what he's supposed to represent. And you made him, for me, for the first time, a completely rounded, actually rather sympathetic human being.
Well, there's all the discussion, the academic discussion as to whether Wagner was taking it out on Hanslick, and there was, of course, the anti-Semitic qualities within all of that argument as well. And I didn't think there was any, for me, it didn't seem there was any ground to be gained by pursuing that. And Graham Vick certainly wasn't pursuing that when he made that production. It wasn't in his brief to do so. And I looked at Beckmesser and began over a period of time during the rehearsals themselves, because I hadn't got him worked out prior to that as to who this man was and what he was. And I suddenly realized it's a brilliant piece of invention. When I spent the year before working with Joe, studying Winterreise all over again, I used to do the same with Meistersinger, to a lesser degree, but just holding the score, which is about that thick. And you think, Wagner took all of these pieces of empty notepaper, first of all, made a libretto, and then he had his manuscript paper and stuck that libretto on there. And it's a phenomenal piece of genius. So he did that. And then this character, who is a town clerk, and in towns where there are councils, and I knew one, the town clerk is that man who just nudges things in certain directions because of his learned skills, learned in a particular field. And he would just guide the chairman or the contributors to whatever the debate might be. And that's what Beckmesser does, but it's a slightly more complex version than that, because they're all of these meisters who have gnarled hands and dirty hands from working with tin and with metal and with leather and wood and what have you. All he has to do is mix a little bit of black ink first thing in the morning and be ready with his pen to say something and make comment. And on top of that, he doesn't belong to that same group of men. And because of that, he doesn't belong to that same group of men. They look at it with this kind of skepticism as to who he is and what he represents. And it became more and more fascinating, because he's the kind of man. There was a bass once said to me when I was preparing Don Giovanni for the first time, and he'd sung it himself quite recently. And we were sitting in the canteen at Covent Garden, and I was getting ready for this, and he knew I was getting ready for this first appearance. And he said, have you ever considered why it is that at the beginning of the opera, when Giovanni says to Leporello, Leporello, ove sei, rather than Leporello, dove sei? And I thought, hell, that's right at the start. No, I haven't thought of that at all. I've been thinking, of the span of the thing, and I hadn't got time to think about the academics of ove as opposed to dove sei. Most interesting. Anyhow, I went on to have quite a lot of success with Don Giovanni, whereas he didn't. And Beckmesser had less success as a poet and singer than the rest of these gifted, ordinary folk who were untutored singers, if you like, which was where we started, really.
You brought up the role that I guess you became most closely associated with Don Giovanni. Do you know how many times you sang that in performance?
Well, it's sort of train spotting, but I think it was something like 350, something over 300.
Did you ever get bored with him?
Never. Never. I mean, I always put down that to the fact that I'm a bear of little brain. I can go back to the honeypot anytime, you know. No, because every time is different. We're not. I don't think we're supposed to repeat what we did 2 nights ago. I think we do what instinct tells us should be happening now. You know, and I say this to every student I work with. You know, just don't be ready with the line that you have to give. You know that line. You know what you're going to say, but listen to what is coming at you before that. That often isn't the case. You know, that the interchange is rat-a-tat-tat like machine gun work, as opposed to thinking, I'm considering what you've just said to me. Ma in questo modo. You have to be malleable. You have to be able to adjust to these things. And thereby keep the thing alive and rich and unpredictable, even in the tiniest ways unpredictable. But it's what keeps it, and it's what keeps it interesting for me. There was a soprano, we're not mentioning any names these days, are we? Who said to me after her second countess, she was not English. Oh, Tom. I said, yes. We were in a car together. Tom, you sung this role a lot. Not the Countess, incidentally, the Countess. I said, yes, a lot. Well, you know, we've done 2 performances now. How do you deal with the boredom? Whoa. That's, I don't know what that says. It's not good, though. It's not good.
You may notice me looking at my watch. That's not because I'm bored, but because Tom literally has a train to catch, and so we need to keep this very strictly timed. But I'm sure you'd like to ask some question that I haven't so far.
No. Oh, yeah.
You mentioned the aura surrounding conductors and so on. I sometimes think, with you saying, you come down to earth from some intense performance. And then there's the relationship between Kathleen Ferrier and Barbaroli. Here's the great Barbaroli. And apparently she would, after some, after asking or whatever, but that was all right, Joe. Do it. And then when she was increasingly ill, the story is that he would go round to her flat and cook lunch for her. So, you get away from the aura with that relationship, which is odd in a way.
Well, I think you can make too much of the aura. I mean, you've picked on somebody who kicked aura out of the ballpark completely. She was such a wonderful person. Whomsoever you speak to about Kathleen Ferrier has nothing but the warmest things to say about her. And I think it was interesting with her that how times have changed. I've mentioned this on a few occasions in conversation. The fact that when we were in this, I think it was probably the lower 6th or the upper 6th, we had a little biology laboratory that advanced biology students could use at school. And it was a kind of club. It was our common room in a way, and we would make coffee in glass beakers, the way scientists did. And we would discuss the merits and demerits of Kathleen Ferrier's voice. That was the kind of 6th form grammar school that was. we did used to discuss Ferrier, and there were those that thought she was wonderful. But this there are instances of that kind of rapport. I mean, Bruno Walter had it with her too. This acknowledgement of something that really is extraordinary. There was a quality to her voice that you don't hear in many. Something happened at Glyndebourne last summer. We were there, and I'll say, not my favorite conductor, right from the start. If you'd asked me the same question, I would have given you that reply that you've had before. Disastrous, terrible. Mind you, I was also on stage, just digressing, should say, I was in the middle of a performance of the Queen of Spades at Covent Garden, and singing Jeletzky. And alongside me was a fellow called Domingo singing German. And so we were slamming away at one another at one point, and he says, "Do you understand?" I said, I have no idea what he's doing. No. And this is mid-performance, you know. Take time off and have a conversation. But at Glyndebourne, for example, I mean, sometimes this world that we inhabit it can be magical at times. I mean, why does the human voice how is it able to do what it does? You know, we've got to get this message across to more people that if I open my gob now, I can fill this place easily. And that's despite the mic. And it's a circus we're involved with, and it really is extraordinary that one can learn to do that. And at Glyndebourne last year, we were preparing Ariadne, and you all meet, and quite often at Glyndebourne you meet people for the first time. You know, there are young recruits coming out of Costa Rica and all sorts of places, cutting their teeth in opera in Glyndebourne, and they all know about it. And over in the corner, there was a girl in a dark blue tracksuit. And rumor was that she was the Ariadne. Didn't know her. We were all getting on with the thing. I was doing my Musiklehre and getting to know my componist, which is, you know, I'm the kind of trainer. I'm there with a towel for her to wipe her down every now and then and make sure she's ready for the next big phrase. And quietly and slowly, the young lady in the corner started to enter into things, quite sheepishly, really. And after a day or two, we found that she had quite a nice sense of humor. She was Norwegian, you know, and a Norwegian with a sense of humor is good. This is good. We like this. So we had a lot of fun starting to get together in this kind of way. And then the days wore on, and we were getting more seriously involved with the thing, and it was time to start and use the voice a wee bit more. Well, she started to use that voice, and then we all went, oh my God. It was extraordinary. Sorry. But it gets you like that. And it doesn't happen very often, but it was Lisa Davidson, and who is a wonderful big girl. Jeannie still has a lasting image of me saying goodbye to her with her breasts there. Great norn of a girl above me. But my God, you know, her voice, where our voices do that, Lisa just stands there and delivers, and this thing starts there and then goes onward. And it was the most exciting experience. I'm sure for some it wasn't, but for so many it was recognizing the Ferrier moment, if you like, you know, that comes along, thankfully, seldom. Pavarotti was like that too, for me. Just to, you know, to sit alongside him where Donald is now, and to see this man, quite a big man, open that mouth and it take a certain shape, and then that sound would come out of it. I forgot where I was for quite a long time, and I just used to stare at him and think, how do you do that? It's amazing.
With that unforgettable farewell image with Lisa Davidson in our minds, it's time for us to let you get your train. Sir Thomas Allen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. You were terrific.